Okay, well, let's get started. I know we're getting started a little bit late, and we want to be sure and give you guys an opportunity to hear our wonderful keynote speakers today, Dr. Cami Gallus and Dr. Jennifer Jones. They're going to be sharing with us today just about fostering belonging and something that we can all embrace and something that we can all do, and being a part of our communities, and just learn from them and some of the research and the work that they've done around this important topic. So with that, I'm going to let you girls take it away and share your screen. Before we get started, if those of you that have questions or you're having any kind of technical difficulties or something, please just put that in the chat box and we will monitor that as we go throughout this morning. So, all right, take it away.
Thank you. We are honored to be with you today. We were lamenting that we're not in person, and I hope someday that we will be again, but also so grateful in the ways that technology has allowed us to continue to connect, and sometimes allows us to attend when maybe we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So we just really want to start by thanking Joni and Heather and the planning committee for the opportunity to join you today. And we plan to focus our time with you on how we can foster belonging in and among our families and our communities. And what we hope you'll leave here with today is a clearer understanding of how we can better support the very ordinary needs of our families.
Yeah, I like how Jennifer always highlights those words, ordinary needs, because we're going to really explore together how that desire to just be included in your community, to have meaningful work, to share your life with people that you love and that love you in return, those are not special needs. Those are rather really very ordinary needs to belong.
So we realize that much of what we have to share with you today is derived from both our personal and professional experiences. So for over 25 years, I've worn both that professional hat and that parent hat. And how I understand families is strongly influenced by the work I do in the field of intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as from my own experiences as a mom. I have three amazing young adult children. They're my children, but they're adults, or at least legally they are. They are 21, 23, and 27. And my 27-year-old son carries a diagnosis of intellectual and developmental disabilities.
And I'm a little newer to the mom role. I have a 4-year-old and almost 5-year-old, 5-year-old and 3-year-old little boys, but have more experience, which is interesting, as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so over the last 20 years or so, my research and clinical work has really focused really broadly on enhancing resilience among marginalized populations as a whole. And it really wasn't until, I want to highlight, it was my relationship with Jennifer as both a colleague and a friend that first heightened my awareness regarding the unique needs and strengths of individuals with disabilities, and also their families, the needs and unique strengths of that those families possess. And it's really been incredibly fulfilling and life-giving to expand my research and clinical work alongside individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And Jennifer and my work together since about 2013 led to the creation of the OSU Institute for Developmental, there just went my entire notebook. The OSU Institute for Developmental Disabilities, where we have numerous research and community engagement projects focused on improving individual and family well-being. And really at the heart of our work at the Institute for Developmental Disabilities, we seek to build relationships that bring individuals with and without disabilities together to live, to learn, to work, and to play.
So the quote here is one that we say often. Relationship is at the heart of who we are and who we are becoming. And as we reflected on who would be here in attendance today, We recognized and hoped that there would be a broad range of personal experiences that are represented in this Zoom room. So regardless of where you are in your personal experience or journey as a family member or a caregiver, and maybe you wear both those hats like I do, we're really hoping that today's session can inspire hope as we join forces to foster belonging for everyone.
I really think belonging is really a deeply personal issue and feeling for all of us. And hopefully all of us have experienced times when we felt that we've belonged, but I think it's also certain that we've all felt times that we've felt marginalized or maybe on the outside of a community. And our experiences as parents and caregivers, we know are going to be diverse when it comes to that. But we hope that we also can recognize that while we have a wide range of strengths and challenges and needs, we want to acknowledge up front that we recognize that. So as we share our stories today, we want to recognize that we're coming from our own context of living alongside individuals with developmental disabilities. So we hope that as we share our work, you won't focus on the labels of differences that I think often can be used to separate us, but rather hope that the stories we share today will be an invitation to you to reflect on your own lived experiences, no matter how broad or range those experiences are.
So it seems a little strange to start talking about belonging and relationship and then to say barriers. But we recognize that we all experience barriers to relationships. And sometimes the barrier to experiencing or offering meaningful relationship is a lack of awareness of, we talk about paradigms or mental models that we carry with us. So really all that a mental model or paradigm is, it's just our experiences, our perspectives, our beliefs.
Yeah. And we certainly have to recognize that we can work in agencies, we can be part of a family or a community that even on the outward says, hey, we ascribe to a strength-based approach. And yet sometimes our own personal paradigms or our social paradigms can still be rooted in seeing difference as deficit, whether that difference is a mental illness or diagnosis or disability or something else. So as we focus on kind of thinking about engaging and joining forces to enhance belonging, we want to take a moment to think about our own paradigms that we bring into our own work and relationships.
So we're going to talk a little bit about paradigms and just do two really broad kind of contrasts. So many of us, and this was certainly the case for me, our introduction to parenting a child whose needs were unique may share a common history. And that common history is depicted in this first orange circle. And it focused on deficits and limitations. We were introduced to our child's diagnosis by what they couldn't, or probably by experts were told they would never be able to do. And that deficit-based paradigm or mental model really focused on identifying problems and viewing the individual as being or having problems. See those orange arrows that are pointed in towards the individual saying this person is a problem. So from a deficit-based paradigm, terms and diagnoses such as disability or challenging behavior or anxiety or depression, those have been used to label and to isolate individuals.
Then in contrast, a strength-based approach is going to be depicted in that blue circle. And it focuses not on fixing or curing the individual who is experiencing maybe those challenging behaviors, the anxiety, maybe the disability, but rather it turns those orange arrows around and focuses on identifying the barriers that exist across contexts and it works to provide supports. So as we stated earlier, we believe fostering belonging is key to as a key piece of removing some of those external barriers and to really move forward to create communities where individuals and families can flourish.
So just as our work at OSU and the Institute for Developmental Disabilities is about building relationships to improve the lives of individuals, we know all of you are here today because of your role as a family member or a caregiver, or maybe a professional also, who is deeply invested in enhancing the lives of those you love and serve. So we titled our talk today, Fostering Belonging, Joining Forces to Support the Ordinary Needs of Families, which begs the question, what does it mean to belong?
That is really a question that has been at the center of all of our work. But I think, again, let's say that again. What does it mean to truly belong? I think we have to think and pause for a second and think for ourselves, what does belonging look like or feel like? And how do we know when we've experienced real belonging? So as we share our experiences, we really invite you to join us on thinking about belonging for yourself and that personal experience of belonging. And we want to invite you to take a few moments right now to just think about a time or maybe a place where you have experienced a strong sense of belonging. And as you think about that time or place, is there a picture or an image maybe that comes to mind? Does belonging for you have a shape? Maybe it has a color. Maybe a special smell or a sound. And finally, as you focus on that time or place of belonging, where do you feel belonging in your body?
So much of what Cammie and I know and understand about belonging has been influenced by our friend and our colleague, Dr. Eric Carter. Dr. Carter's 10 dimensions of belonging are depicted in the illustration on the slide. And Dr. Carter's work on belonging really resonated with us as it supported our understanding that relationships are key to all of our lives. So what does it mean to belong? To belong is to be present, to be invited, to be welcomed, to be known, to be accepted, to be supported, to be cared for or heard, to be befriended, to be needed, and to be loved.
Dr. Carter developed this specific framework of belonging through his research that was really focused on how to best equip young people with disabilities to participate meaningfully in all aspects of community life and to find rich and lasting relationships. And last year, we asked Dr. Carter, last March 2020, and some other scholars to join us for the OSU Chautauqua to discuss belonging and how it can be used to enhance individual, family, and community resilience.
So Cammie and I are professors. And so as professors, we talk about scientific definitions and theories, and we have a theme within our department that really is the thread that guides all of our work, and that's resilience. And there are a lot of scientific definitions and theories in regards to resilience, and many of these theories focus on the individual, and in particular, the individual's ability to bounce back from adversity. So much like the individual, the small plant in this picture is making its way through the dry soil.
In contrast, Jennifer and ours work at the Institute for Developmental Disabilities works to understand resilience, not as something that as an individual we can do or achieve on our own, but rather we see it as a dynamic interaction between individuals and their environments. So the peoples, the communities, the systems that we're a part of play a key role in our resilience. In other words, I think put quite simply, we believe all people thrive best in relationship. So what we aim to highlight today is that individuals do not only not exist, but they don't thrive in isolation. And I think that's interesting to think about over the last year or so that we've all had a bit in isolation. I think we could all speak to the challenges to our own abilities to thrive at times because of that. And I think it's easy to look at these flowers on this picture that are thriving together in an environment that they belong within, right? So very different than that dry soil that we saw in the first picture. Here is an environment that says, hey, you belong, and together there's thriving. So our efforts to enhance resilience really focus on the context in which resilience is nurtured. So on creating those times and those places where people and families can experience belonging in their communities.
So all of us here know that strong and effective family relationships are key to belonging and to resilience. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spend the next 20 to 25 minutes exploring how we've seen the power of these 10 dimensions of belonging in our work alongside individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. And again, we hope that as we share our stories, you'll begin to see these dimensions of belonging in your life, in your family, in your work.
Absolutely. So to start with, to belong, you must first be present, right? There's the old adage that goes, you must be present to win. And I think the same couldn't be more true when it comes to belonging. So as the first dimension of belonging, presence is absolutely essential, right? Yet in our work, when we kind of thought about those old raffle rules of life of being present, we quickly realized that, like, unfortunately, many college campuses, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities lacked a consistent and a meaningful presence on the OSU campus. And we wanted and needed and quite honestly expected that we needed to have more of a presence.
Photo on your screen is members of a book club at OSU from a few years back. And it makes me smile. And right now it's making me tear up because I'm looking at all these people who I love so much. And since fall of 2015, Opportunity Orange book clubs have been meeting on the OSU campus. And then last year, 20 and 21, we met on Zoom. And book clubs at OSU began when I reached out to my friend and colleague, Tom Fish, who was now retired, but he was at the other OSU, Ohio State. And I asked him to help bring Next Chapter Book Club model to Oklahoma. So Tom and a graduate student of his had developed this model. It was actually on other continents, but we didn't have any here in Oklahoma. So he came, he graciously traveled to Stillwater that summer, and he trained us in the unique community-based book club model that's designed to help individuals with developmental disabilities just enjoy books, make new friends, and be a part, be present in their communities.
Quite honestly, Opportunity Orange Book Club is quite simple and easy, but it also was a hit on our campus. And as our clubs grew, so did the presence that we were looking for across our college. So when we started off and were able to be in person, our book clubs would meet in what we called the Skywalk, which is a pretty busy thoroughfare in our college. And as a result, we had frequent drop-ins from fellow students and staff and faculty that wanted to just join in the fun. So being present wasn't limited to individuals with disabilities. For us, book club was a wonderful reminder of the power of presence, and we quickly realized that we wanted to expand those opportunities for individuals, again, with and without disabilities, to belong together across our campus, throughout other colleges and in other ways.
This photo is another one of my favorites. We get to put in all our favorite photos. So this is one of my very favorites. This one hangs in my office as well. And it's from an ongoing research and community engagement project called Let's Take a Walk that we developed 3.5 years ago, almost 4. So Let's Take a Walk paired OSU undergraduate students and adult community members with intellectual and developmental disabilities to walk together a couple of times a week across the OSU campus. Looking back on it, our design of Let's Take a Walk intentionally invited and welcomed both students and community members to a time and a place of belonging. So to belong, you also have to be invited.
Now, don't get us wrong. So just like any time you embark on a new project or a process, we told ourselves the million reasons why this wasn't going to work. And the parents and staff at times were happy to chime in with some of their own reservations. And looking back, there were risks and there certainly were barriers. However, we held true to our belief that disability is a natural part of the human experience and a natural part of diversity, and that everyone benefits when we embrace that diversity. So with a lot of excitement and a great deal of planning behind it, knowing that we didn't know what we didn't know, we just extended an open and honest invitation to some community members and to some students to join us, to quite simply just walk around campus for an hour twice a week together.
So to belong, you must also be welcomed. As a faculty member, I've spent a good deal of time, almost over 20 years now, on the OSU Stillwater campus. But my favorite memories of campus didn't have much to do with my work before Let's Take a Walk. And I love what I do, genuinely love what I do. But if you ask any member of the Jones family what our favorite days of the year are, we would tell you that it is no doubt the 3 days that we spend together on the OSU campus for Special Olympics state games. My family has been welcomed by the OSU campus every May for more than 20 years. And many of our best memories have been alongside friends that we met at Special Olympics, some of who I think are here today, when we've all felt welcomed by that OSU campus community.
It was after several years of hearing about Special Olympics and how much the Jones family experienced the OSU campus in a whole new way that my family just had to get a little taste of what that was like. But I also need to warn you, don't mistake having fun with the lack of competitiveness. No one is more competitive than Garrett Jones, Jennifer's daughter. And we jokingly love to tell the story about how my husband, Nick, only made the bocce roster after he, as Garrett's unified partner, after he submitted a couple of tryout tapes, videos of him playing bocce. But being welcomed into that team of Special Olympics truly was like no other. We were just reflecting on it this last summer. We had finally a get together with the bocce team, people I had not seen in a couple of years, and they almost feel like family, and we've only known them for a little bit of time. And so it's so clear to see why we wanted that same sense of welcoming that our Special Olympic athletes experience on campus each and every day of the year, right? And many to expand that across campus throughout the year, we wanted to take Let's Take a Walk to embody. We wanted it to embody that same sense of welcome. So when we started Let's Take a Walk, we were really focused on how do we roll out the red carpet for our community members and our students who are engaging in this activity together. We wanted them to know that beyond being present and beyond just being invited, they were generally welcomed on campus.
I can tell you that first spring of 2018, when we did Let's Take a Walk, it was without question the 2 hours I spent walking alongside students and community members, the best 2 hours of my week. It was truly magical for me. And for me, campus was becoming a place that welcomed individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities more than just those 3 days in May of state games.
And as our research kind of later showed us, it was also powerful for our community members and students to be welcomed into a new community and a new opportunity to experience campus in a new light. So today is not about our research, so we won't bore you with a lot of the statistics behind what we found, but the positive outcomes across this short 10-week program were really exciting and even quite honestly a bit surprising to us. So our community walkers, those are the community members or adults with developmental disabilities who joined us, reported clinically significant decreases in depression and anxiety just across those 10 weeks. So what I'm telling you is that with the beginning of this, we gave a short scale on depression and anxiety. And across those 10 weeks, we saw them move from levels that we would potentially move for a potential diagnosis of depression and anxiety based on their levels of symptoms to subclinical thresholds of anxiety and depression. So quite honestly, it surprised us. I have a hard time getting those sort of results out of a gold standard therapy approach. But it was really encouraging to see that expressed from our community members, and also the positive changes in attitudes towards disability and inclusion that we saw our student walkers report. So we also had a short measure that our student walkers completed, just regards to their experience and attitudes about disability. And we saw incredible changes across that 10-week experience in both of those groups in really remarkable ways.
To belong, you must also be known. And I want to take a moment to read the text that appears on this slide. Belonging is personal. The extent to which someone is known well by others in a community can impact their sense of connectedness and membership. To be noticed, recognized, and acknowledged by others are each important aspects of belonging.
To know and to be known truly is at the heart of deep and meaningful relationships. And when we feel we're known by another, that's really when we begin to trust, right? I think this dimension might be best illustrated by sharing a story of one of our longtime Opportunity Orange Book Club members named Mark. So after several semesters of being present, being invited, being welcomed, it wasn't until Mark's mom was confident that Jennifer knew him, that she transitioned from seeing book club as just a safe weekly activity for Mark to really a trusting community as a place of belonging for her son.
So many semesters, I invite our Opportunity Orange Book Club members to serve as guest speakers in my undergraduate class on developmental disabilities. And as I always do, I stopped by the Skywalk, and I asked our book club members if they'd be interested in joining that year. And Mark indicated that he wanted to join. So I went back to my office and I sent the email invitation to parents and caregivers, letting them know when the guest panel was going to be and asking if their loved one could be a part. And I promptly received a response from Mark's mom, questioning whether my invitation was really meant for Mark. After all, she explained, Mark's limited verbal communication would seemingly limit his ability to participate as a guest speaker, let alone belong in a college class. She explained in her words, autism had robbed Mark of his voice and Down syndrome had stolen his mind. And between those powerful lines of her email, I could hear Mark's mom asking, do you even know my son? My initial response was one of hesitance. She was right. Who was I to suggest that Mark belonged on a speaker's panel? I'm a mama, and us mamas don't really like to be told different things. And so I really hesitated on how I should respond. And yet, when I asked Mark, he indicated that he wanted to respond. So I paused, and then I cautiously replied to Mark's mom's email. And I explained that my invitation was genuine and that while I knew Mark to be a man of few words, he communicates powerfully, and my students had much to learn from him. So I was both relieved, very grateful when Mark's mom emailed back and said that she and Mark would love to join us in class that next week.
I think Mark and his moms just helped to remind us that if we were going to be a community committed to belonging, we had to adopt a different perspective. You know, instead of focusing on, again, the labels of disability or difference or diagnosis, a community committed to belonging has to approach individuals just as that, as individuals, each unique and worthy of getting to know deeply and personally. So in joining forces to foster belonging, we must seek to learn each other's personal stories and strive to understand those interests and passions, skills and gifts and talents that each and every member of our community is bringing. And so quite simply, again, we just must get to know one another.
And yet, it's not enough to be known. Belonging requires that we also feel accepted. And we would be amiss to not include some of the struggles and the challenges that we've encountered, that all of us encounter as we've sought to create times and places of belonging.
I think, you know, even though I had been working alongside individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities for several years prior to our first Let's Take a Walk group, it was really that communal aspect on campus of Let's Take a Walk that forced me to expand my understanding of the barriers to belonging. As we walked across campus together twice a week, I had to come face to face with some of the stigma and the inequity that, quite honestly, I knew existed. But as a person without disability, I hadn't had to personally experience at all. And unfortunately, a lack of acceptance is all too often that painful barrier to belonging for many of us. And for many of our OSU or undergraduate students that participated in Let's Take a Walk, this was their first time that they had been faced with some of those challenges of stigma and inequity that individuals with disabilities may experience on our campus. Students, quite honestly, struggled with a lot of their own emotions when other OSU students, maybe not involved with our Let's Take a Walk program, would express some negative stigmas and attitudes towards our group. It was not uncommon for students not involved to express some annoyance at how slow some of our community members with disabilities were walking and impeding, you know, their natural flow to their class across campus during that quick 10-minute interchange between classes. And to be confronted with that was a great learning experience for all of us.
As Cammie said earlier, we knew there were going to be risks and barriers, but we believed that modeling acceptance would lead to a growing acceptance from others on campus. And so we forged ahead, and throughout Let's Take a Walk, something wonderful happened that we couldn't possibly have planned. And isn't that the way life goes? Things happen organically that you can't plan for, and that's what this picture is. So our walkers developed a practice of stopping in front of the university library where there's a fountain. And they competed in a series of what we called library races, where they would pit a student walker against a community walker in a competition of speed. And it was a competition. There was no gimmies here. And so what happened during this time is that other college students or faculty or staff who were not a part of Let's Take a Walk would stop and they would watch us engage in these races. You know, people walk the same path every day at, 2:45 headed to a class, and we would be there and they would stop and they would cheer and they would congratulate our walkers with high fives. And these library races developed into a consistent favorite activity for student and community walkers, and they garnered a few regular fans across our campus community.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts. I also love like this competition thing, right? So don't mistake fun and belonging for lack of competition. If you look at our Institute website, we hope that you will read in several places that we embrace the belief that people with and without disabilities belong together. Because again, we wholeheartedly believe disability is a natural part of human diversity, and that all of our well-being is going to be enhanced when we navigate life together in families and communities where we feel like we belong. And so Let's Take a Walk really just reinforced for us that we all have a need to be accepted. And that wasn't only true for our community member walkers, but also our student walkers. I remember one of our student walkers described having some personal struggles related to her home and personal life during that semester that she was part of Let's Take a Walk. And she relayed later to us in some focus groups and interviews that Let's Take a Walk met her need for acceptance, because as she described it, Let's Take a Walk wasn't, quote, was just a place where I could come and not be judged. And I remember another student walker described this Let's Take a Walk community as really their safe place and a time and place where they felt accepted.
Belonging also includes being supported. This picture shows Caleb also in front of the Edmond Lowe Library with his walking partner, Cammie Chitty, different Cammie than who's here today. And Caleb and his mom graciously allow us to share a little bit more about his story and their lives. Caleb has cerebral palsy and a diagnosis of intellectual disability. And when we use that strength-based approach, and for me, it's the social ecological model, we don't minimize those diagnoses, but rather instead of focusing on Caleb's diagnosis or difference, a social ecological model focuses our attention not on fixing or on curing Caleb, but instead just working alongside Caleb and his family to figure out what supports does he need to live the life he wants to live.
I think what's also really helpful about the social ecological perspective is that, again, it highlights for us that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families, again, they're not inherently different from individuals and families who don't experience disabilities in regards, especially to their hopes and their dreams. And as we've mentioned before, to find people to love and who love you in return, to engage in meaningful work and to belong in your community. These are not special needs. These are very ordinary needs. So I think it's really important to think about how family and professional partnerships can be committed to belonging and strive to know each person and recognize that some people may require different, more individualized supports to engage more fully in their community. So Caleb's walking partner, Cammie, really supported him to fully participate in Let's Take a Walk, and part of that was by adapting her walking speed and lending her arm as a steady base. But just as important was her talking endlessly about Thunder basketball, right? And her ability to have a good-natured banter about his love for OSU while he walked on the OSU campus.
So belonging also includes being heard. The work of Bert and colleagues has challenged us, serving as a guide for much of our work over the past decade. And so this quote has been written on the whiteboard in my office for many, many years, and I'm going to read it to you. The challenge for researchers without intellectual disability will be to acknowledge that their own understanding of intellectual disability lies at the level of discourse, and that their goal is to try and understand at the level of experience by listening carefully to the people who live this identity every day.
I want to invite you to just take a moment to substitute, easy for me to say, the words researchers and intellectual disabilities in this quote with your role and maybe the family member that you provide care or work alongside. So maybe your statement would read more like, the challenge for a parent of a child with a disability will be to acknowledge that their own understanding of disability will always be at the level of knowing rather than at the level of experiencing. Or maybe it's the challenge for a dad who doesn't experience depression will be to acknowledge that his own understanding of depression will lie at the level of discourse.
This quote challenges me to recognize my own limited perspective. So even for those of us who have lived experience, I've been a mama of a son with developmental disabilities for over 25 years. I have to recognize how my perspective may be limited. And I'm often reminded that my perspective as a parent is just that, the perspective of one mom. I don't know what it feels like to be Garrett, the only person with an intellectual disability in his workplace and in our family, nor do I really understand my other two children's perspective, having lived their entire lives with a brother whose daily support needs did place and continue to place different demands on our family than those of their peers.
I think no matter our roles, we're all challenged through this dimension of belonging to really adopt a listening to understand stance, whether we're professionals or family members or friends. We cannot assume that our voices of experience or our limited perspectives are enough. All of us have to embrace ongoing humility that's going to continuously recognize that the family members or the individuals that we love and work alongside are always going to be our best teachers. They're going to be our best program evaluators, and they're really going to be the ones that drive the most meaningful and effective change, especially when they are heard.
To belong also means to be befriended. And we ended our first semester of Let's Take a Walk together, like many other campus communities, celebrating with our friends.
As you can see from this picture here of some dance moves going on, we reserved the largest room in our college for 2 hours where we handed out medals to all of our community and student walker participants who crossed the finish line. We played games, and again, from the picture, as you can tell, we even broke out in some dance moves. So as one student, OSU student who described the extreme amount of joy that she felt and everyone laughing and cheering, she just talked about how Let's Take a Walk just seems like something very exciting and like something that people would be drawn to, that everyone would want to be a part of. When we first started up our Opportunity Orange book clubs and Let's Take a Walk, we, as we mentioned, knew that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities needed meaningful opportunities for social and community inclusion. So looking at our annual data from our National Core Indicators Project, we knew that adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities across our state reported that they needed more physical activities and exercise, and they also reported both needing and wanting more ways to make new friends. So when we started off designing each of our programs in the Institute for Developmental Disabilities, we were primarily focused on ways we could meet the needs of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities that we heard.
However, what we didn't realize was how much we needed. I need book club. I need Let's Take a Walk. Our OSU students need these, and how greatly OSU needed all of the relationships that our programs are fostering.
And now we come to our final of the 10 dimensions. To belong is to be loved. I always kind of pause when we get to this one because I think love can be maybe an unusual, maybe even an uncomfortable word to throw out in a more professional setting like we have today at a conference. And maybe it is our own discomfort with that word that is maybe all too common, the barrier to belonging for us all. Yet we know that healthy families and communities, they're marked by love. We go to great lengths for those we love. We go the extra mile. We extend forgiveness and grace, and we value relationships over our to-do lists. You know, when we talk about what matters most to us, we're all going to talk about those times and places that we felt loved. And I couldn't agree more with Dr. Eric Carter when he says that perhaps the greatest of these 10 dimensions of belonging is to be loved.
And yet, as this quote so beautifully reminds us, to be loved, it says it is not a goal we can strive for. It is not something we can achieve. To be loved by someone implies that the most important thing in our lives is something we can only receive as a gift. We've said several times today that belonging is a very ordinary need. However, we are keenly aware that ordinary is not always simple, and simple is not always easy.
We talk a lot about belonging in our work, and often, as we started off, that recognize that it's not only deeply personal, but I think it requires a lot of all of us, because it requires us to be both intentional in our relationships and vulnerable at the same time. So belonging requires us to extend to others, but also to be willing ourselves to be present, to be invited, to be welcomed, to be known, to be accepted, to be supported, to be heard, to be befriended, to be needed, and to be loved.
Preparing for today gave Cammie and I another opportunity to pause, reflect on the work we do, where we've been and where we're headed. And it always renews my hope, because when reflecting, we realize that while great inequities exist, while there is stigma, while there is prejudice and bias, it doesn't take much to move the needle. And even small projects, whether those are family projects or whether those are work, scholarship kind of projects, when implemented with great care and intentionality, can have big impacts. And our work suggests that the thoughtful and the intentional design of community engaged programming that fosters belonging does lead to more resilient individuals and families and communities.
In the past few days, hopefully all of you received in your mailbox or on your doorstep a really adorable conference box. My boys loved it. They thought it was for them. And they took all the Skittles and the bubble gum, of course. But each of you hopefully received in that adorable box a brief worksheet on belonging that we wanted to provide to you to just serve as a guide, to hopefully invite you to pause and reflect and begin to explore belonging in your own life and in your families and in your work with other professionals and other friends in your communities. So in the stories Jennifer and I shared with you today, we've highlighted the power of those 10 dimensions of belonging and the importance of both intentionally being intentional and embodying a strength-based approach. The intentionality starts, we think, by taking an inventory of what we're doing well right now and what we need to start, stop, or build upon. And that's really where each of those projects and programs that we discussed came from, was us stopping and reflecting and just taking the next step towards belonging. So we hope that you each will take the time to reflect on how you can foster belonging for yourself and for the individuals and the family members that you share life with in your communities.
We hope that the experiences and the stories that we've shared with you today help shine the light on what are some of the present pathways to being a more resilient family and a community where everyone experiences true belonging. We are reminded again and again that for all of us, relationships are at the heart of who we are and who we are becoming. The need to belong is universal, and it's key to our individual, our family, and our community health and resilience.
I think one thing that stood out to Jennifer and I as we've wrestled with and strove towards building and fostering belonging in our own lives and in the Institute and the work that we do is the idea of hope. And I think oftentimes we can think of hope as being a future goal, right? I hope to get there. And I think when we experience true belonging, our hope is that hope no longer is something that we're seeking after. It's no longer that future destination, but that hope can actually become a resource in our present moment when we're in those moments where we feel in relationship, and that we are able to then cultivate relationships that cultivate present moment hope.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. We look forward to being able to be with you in person at some point.
I'm on mute. Thank you guys both for sharing again your message of belonging, and something that we can all take and implement personally within our family, within our community, within our workplace, and just truly make a difference in using, just the message of belonging and hope, and making sure that we include everyone in our community, and, just value and appreciate people for the gifts and talents that they have. So thank you for sharing again. We did record this session. I know we had some people jump on a little bit late, so we'll be sharing that information after the conference. For those who did not receive a conference box, some of those might have been because of late registration. We also got overwhelmed the last week with registrations coming in. So we'll figure out how to address that going forward. But a lot of that, I think, is just because of late registration. It was kind of a first come, first serve, if you will, in regards to conference boxes. So thanks for your patience with that. I also put in the chat just a evaluation that one of our partners helped us put together, just to gather some information about this session and other sessions that we'll be providing. So if you could click on that and take a look at that for us, we would really appreciate it. Other than that, everyone should have received in your inbox the agenda at a glance with all the links for the upcoming sessions. We have a break from 1 to 1:30. So go grab some lunch or fill up your water bottles or whatever you need to do to get ready for that. And we will begin again at 1:30. We have 4 different sessions to choose from. If you have any problems accessing or did not receive the email, please email the events@oklahomafamilynetwork.org email address, and we'll get you the information that you need for those sessions coming up. So thank you again, Dr. Jones and Dr. Gallus, for your presentation, and we look forward to being able to connect with you in person someday soon, and continue this conversation and just how we can make a difference in our family and our communities. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at 1:30.